Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for our latest Spring Talks panel, exploring the highly topical and relevant theme of beauty and sustainability. I'm Sally Ann Lim, Insights Director at Spring Studios, and I have the pleasure of hosting today's webinar. I'm thrilled to be joined today by three amazing panelists. Tiina Frazer, Chief Marketing Officer of Nordic beauty brand LUMENE, pioneers of the circular economy in beauty. David Alpert, Managing Director of the International Institute of Anti-Aging, intrepid marine photographer and passionate advocate for sustainable business practices. And Assheton Stewart Carter, CEO of leading sustainability advisory firm TDi Sustainability, who brings a really unique perspective to today's discussion. I'll be kicking off today with a brief presentation of Spring's latest thought leadership report, Crafting Compelling Sustainable Beauty Communications in the Age of Greenwashing, before diving in to explore the key themes with our brilliant panelists. I should also say that we have a Q&A function within the webinar interface, so if you would like to submit any questions for our panelists, please do go ahead and do so using that chat function, and we'll try and keep around 5 to 10 minutes at the end to run through those. So without further delay, let me share my presentation. So from the ban on microbeads to increasing concern around single-use plastics, the buzz around clean beauty to the more recent blue beauty movement, it's fair to say that consumers are waking up to the real impact that their beauty regime has on the planet. Further accelerated by the effects of the pandemic, conscious consumers are looking to reevaluate their beauty routines, and in so doing, take steps to clean up the industry as a whole. This increased focus on sustainability has given rise to an exciting new generation of beauty brands that are generous in their education and don't require consumers to compromise between efficacy, ethics, and aesthetics. And yet, the predominance of misleading eco-claims and lack of universal sustainable certification means that so-called greenwashing is still rife. As a result, the ability for beauty brands and retailers to communicate sustainability in a way that is clear, compelling, and constructive is more essential than ever before. And so I'm going to be walking you through Spring's 5 guiding principles for crafting compelling, sustainable beauty communications that can really capture consumers' imaginations and help to bring about meaningful change. Starting with number 1, create a compelling and ownable narrative underpinned by action. Sustainable beauty is a hot topic with a deluge of both legacy brands and new entrants vying to win over conscious consumers with their commitments and claims. As our understanding and attitudes towards sustainability are evolving at pace, the challenge is really to identify that sweet spot where a brand's values and what is timely and relevant to consumers intersect. Those that cut through are able to craft narratives that not only resonate on an emotional level, but are underpinned by tangible actions and initiatives, successfully appealing to both consumers' hearts and to their minds. And I have 2 examples just to bring this point to life. On the left-hand side, in March of this year, Unilever announced that it was removing the word normal from all of its products and communications in a bid to help end discrimination in beauty and focus on its positive and sustainable practices. Spring is proud to have brought this initiative to life with a concept that redefines normality and underlines Unilever's commitment to doing good for both people and planet. Crucially, the positive beauty mission is further underpinned by several progressive commitments. The pledge to protect and regenerate 1.5 million hectares of land, forest, and ocean by 2030, and supporting a global ban on animal testing for cosmetics by 2023. On the right-hand side, Biotherm's Live by Blue Beauty manifesto is a veritable call to arms, inviting consumers to join them in the topical blue beauty movement, and also explaining what it means to the brand. Beauty that comes from the ocean through the responsible sourcing of the brand's life plankton hero ingredient, and gives back through its commitment to ocean protection and reducing plastic waste. The brand actually launched its Water Lovers Ocean Protection Initiative back in 2012, which sees it working with experts and NGOs. And to this day, Biotherm continue to pioneer refillable and recycling packaging solutions across its full range. Number 2, appeal to the new Skinnimalist consumer mindset. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, the pandemic has really prompted people to reconsider their beauty regimes. One of Pinterest's top predictions for 2021, Skinnimalist, is all about achieving a pared-back, healthy, effortless glow, and searches for natural everyday makeup are also up 180% year-on-year. Savvy brands are recognizing that this buy less, choose well mindset actually really neatly dovetails with the growing interest in sustainable beauty, and are highlighting skincare meets makeup hybrids that satisfy consumers' desire for both invisible coverage and more sustainable, streamlined beauty regimes. As part of this, we're also seeing that refillable products are gaining in traction and sophistication across both skincare, but also increasingly in cosmetics. And they're increasingly being positioned as covetable items to keep and to treasure, with implications for luxury brands, as well as products that are better for the planet. With its clean, skin-centric beauty positioning, IIAA boasts a range of best-selling multis, hard-working products with versatile uses that are part skincare and part cosmetics. They appeal to the Skinnimalist mindset with products that can be used to colour and highlight both cheeks and lips, as well as a serum highlighter that delivers that desirable dewy glow alongside blue light protection. IIAA have worked hard to simplify and source materials that are both safe for planet and safe for product, and are partnering with TerraCycle to ensure that all of its packaging can be broken down responsibly. And on the right-hand side, from its inception, Victoria Beckham's eponymous beauty brand's goal has been to deliver true luxury performance in the clean beauty space. The brand brings together a clean and lean approach to product formulation, responsible sourcing, and sustainably minded design. In addition to its zero plastic solid brass smoky eye compact, Victoria Beckham Beauty recently released its first ever refillable product, a covetable matte bronzing brick that you see pictured here. Number 3, be transparent and generous in sharing insight and education. Now today, there are a plethora of interests that come under the umbrella of sustainability: cruelty-free, sustainably sourced, ethical, refillable, recyclable, etc. What constitutes sustainable is not clear-cut, as there is no universal regulation, and supply chains and technology are evolving at pace. As a result, it's no wonder that 33% of consumers are struggling to understand which products are genuinely eco-friendly, according to a recent report by Mintel. And 61% of women globally feel that brands are just labeling their products with clean beauty without any tangible details. And so the challenge for brands is twofold: be transparent, both in terms of progress and commitments, and increase education so that consumers are better equipped to make those sustainable choices. In 2018, Ren Clean Skincare first declared its commitment to going zero waste by the end of 2021. And in so doing, also committed to being totally transparent about every step of that journey towards its 2021 goal. As CEO Arnold Meisel explains, this is particularly crucial as, from a consumer perspective, many of the changes aren't actually very visible. The product experience is the same, or indeed it improves, but we are explaining as we make these changes how and why components are now recycled and recyclable. And on the right-hand side, IIAA's Advanced Nutrition Programme is a range of innovative supplements formulated to support healthy skin and well-being, as well as protecting the planet. Managing Director David, who joins us here today, is, as I mentioned in the introduction, a passionate marine photographer who, appalled by what he saw of the damage to the marine ecosystem, introduced 100% environmentally friendly recycled and recyclable paper packaging, raising awareness of the fact that even so-called and so-labelled recyclable products can unfortunately end up in landfill. IIAA have coined and hold themselves to the drop test standard. Now, I know that has a number of connotations within the beauty industry, but for the IIAA, that means they ask themselves, if I dropped this product in the forest or the ocean, would it biodegrade? Number 4, recognise that circular beauty can extend beyond category. We've really reached a turning point at which we recognise that no single person or company can bring about change at an industry level, and yet every individual action is important. The concept of the circular economy has gained considerable traction in recent years, based on the principles of designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. Inspired by this, innovative beauty brands are embracing unexpected cross-category and even intra-category partnerships in a bid to make the beauty business as a whole more sustainable. Spring has the pleasure of working closely with LUMENE, a Nordic beauty brand that have been pioneers of the circular economy in beauty for over 20 years, demonstrating the potential of cross-category collaboration by working closely with the Finnish food and forestry industries. In fact, the majority of LUMENE's potent Nordic ingredients are actually sourced from side streams of these industries that would otherwise go to waste. And we can explore that more with Tiina in the conversation to follow. And on the right-hand side, launched in April this year by Ren, the We Are Allies campaign defied industry convention by seeing the brand form an unexpected alliance with 4 of its competitors: Biossance, Use for People, Caudalie, and Herbivore. The brands are united in making a zero waste pledge that states that all brands will create packaging that can be recycled and reused and that contains recyclable elements by 2025. Vasiliki Petru, Group CEO and EVP of Unilever Prestige, explains, "It's true that advertising the competition doesn't make a lot of sense in traditional business. However, the current environmental crisis calls for us all to do things differently." And my 5th and final point, make recycling part of your CRM strategy. Now, I'm sure you'll all recall that over a decade ago now, MAC Cosmetics introduced Back to MAC, a program that works to reduce landfill by encouraging customers to return 6 of its empty products for recycling in order to receive a free lipstick. Fast forward to the present day, and innovative beauty brands are actively underlining their commitment to sustainability by making recycling programs a key part of their customer loyalty schemes, rewarding members for playing their part in reducing waste and not just simply for purchase. As part of this dynamic, loyalty scheme members opt in to receive regular communications about the brand's sustainability commitments, effectively reinforcing shared values and also helping to keep them top of mind. So on the left-hand side, Korean natural beauty brand Innisfree is so committed to promoting sustainability that it has built it into the mechanics of its loyalty program. Working with leading recycling company TerraCycle, Innisfree hosts recycling points in every single one of its retail stores. Loyalty scheme members not only receive points for every purchase that they make, but they can also earn points for each empty container that they return. Although I must point out that this is actually capped at 3 empty products per customer per month to ensure that they still keep to conscious consumption of their products. And my final example of this part of the presentation comes from Bare Minerals. Empty full-size makeup and skincare products from any brand are accepted as part of Bare Minerals' Give Back, Get Back recycling program. Members of the brand's FAB loyalty program earn 5 FAB points for every item bought into participating Bare Minerals boutiques. Furthermore, proceeds generated by the brand's recycling program are actually donated to help alleviate hunger in local communities. So really effectively doing good for both people and for planet. And so there you have it in a easily screenshotable format, our 5 guiding principles for crafting compelling sustainable beauty communications. And I'm now going to ask my panelists to please join me so that we can jump into the discussion. Lovely to see you all, and thank you again very much for joining us. So to kick things off, as I mentioned in my presentation, the pandemic has really served to underscore the critical importance of sustainability and inspired many people to reevaluate their beauty routines. How has this affected you and your business? And have you seen an evolution at all in your customer base? And Tiina, perhaps I can start with you on this one.
Sure, Sally, and thank you. To answer this question, I need to give a little bit more background on LUMENE for the audience. So LUMENE is a brand about naturalness, wildcrafting, and Nordic quality. And sustainability has been our way of, or our approach in our business long before the pandemic. More specifically, it goes back to, like you said, 20 years ago, early 2000s, when we started upcycling, using upcycled ingredients from the food industry, and more specifically, a little orange berry called cloudberry. It grows in the northern bogs of Finland, and it's used for juice production. And when you press the berry for juice, what's left over are peels and seeds. So we started using the seeds, seed oil, because it has brightening properties and it's an anti-age ingredient. So that's where the story kind of started. And since then, we've developed together with those partners of ours, we use 6 different ingredients or components of the berry, so minimum goes to waste. And then from that, during that 20 years, we've have a network of small and bigger businesses in a similar instance, and the latest one is a company, big food company here in Finland called Fazer, and it's another upcycled ingredient from oat hulls. We get oat xylitol, which is now used in 2 of our latest launches. So since then, of course, the ingredient sourcing has been where the story started, but we looked through the other areas of our business. For instance, we have a factory here in Kauklahti, Espoo, and they've been using green electricity over the years, and now they started in the last couple of years using renewed fuel oil and heating from a local partner, renewable district heating, and they're almost carbon neutral. So sustainability for LUMENE has been a journey since the early 2000s. And before the pandemic, we started thinking, well, we need to articulate this. We need to put a framework around our sustainability program. And we were faced with a positive problem, really, because we had so many things to talk about. But what like you said, Sally-Ann, in your opening presentation, what the sweet spot for us was, and what really resonated with our values was the circular beauty and the circular economy part of it. That history then coupled with the fact that before the pandemic, Nordic lifestyle and Nordic beauty had been rising in popularity. People looked to learn from our clean, sustainable, even mindful way of life here up in the north. So that coupled with the trends that then has been happening during the pandemic, where you said the sustainability conversation has been broadening, and this has been accelerated by consumers' awareness on sustainability and wellness in general. So I think, look, consumers are looking for brands to guide them and aid them in their search for a quest for more ethical and sustainable lifestyles. And I can say that our brand story has resonated strongly with our audience across our markets. And it's been, look, we were nominated the most sustainable beauty brand in Finland. We rose to the 21st position out of all brands from the 40th to a year ago. So look, for us, it's been something that the brand story has really started resonating across our audiences.
Great. And Tiina touched on something really interesting there that I know, Assheton, you sort of spoke about when we had a conversation in the lead up to this webinar. You made the point about the fact that health has become such a huge priority for customers. And I wanted to know, how has this affected your consultancy work and the brands that you work with?
Yeah, no, thanks, Sally. And you're right, the pandemic has focused minds on health for sure. And not only it's important to customers, but also an importance to employees' well-being. To produce great products, you need a healthier, motivated workforce, of course. And for our clients, as you say, this has become a glaring sustainability priority. The other thing I think the pandemic has done is shine a light on the dependence on supply chains and the resiliency of supply chains. It's revealed the fragility of where we get our inputs and our products from. And the pandemic, by definition, hit everywhere. And so all supply chains have been affected. Shortage in raw materials, in particular, and getting those materials across borders to manufacturers and workshops in time and on spec has become even more difficult. You know, I think what it shows many of our clients, we can't take our supplier base for granted or expect the silent hand the market will provide if one supplier is locked down or furloughed or just doesn't have the available staff. So the conversations we're now having with our clients is about how we can engage and nurture long-term relationships with the supply chain as far up the chain as you can possibly go. And these engagement strategies with suppliers now need to be more rounded, more holistic. You know, ad hoc requests from brands to their suppliers to report on human rights records or labor conditions that might have been sufficient up until now are not really so effective there. And this is because there's different aspects of sustainability and health and well-being, environmental, human rights, and they're beginning to bleed into one. And so the appropriate expectations of how these should be addressed are not yet super clear. And where the problem crosses organizational borders, as so many environmental issues does, and so many health issues like the pandemic do, is not clear whose responsibility for addressing it is. And so one really encouraging thing I think we've seen coming out of the pandemic, a really kind of good thing, is that there's been a shift for increased collaboration within our clients' organizations, so across the sustainability department to the procurement department, but also between companies, as the reality is that we all have to pull together to solve some of these tough sustainability problems, and that's been thrown into very sharp relief. And I think the pandemic, for all the bad it's done, has shown us that that is really the only way.
Lots of stuff that you touched on there that I'm sure I'll circle back to as we go on. But David, I think what's really interesting is that obviously the majority of your kind of customers are, or, you know, you work with beauty professionals incredibly closely and salon owners. I wondered what impact the pandemic has had on them, particularly given the fact that they had those extended periods of salon closure and what that meant for you.
So thanks, Eddie. And firstly, thank you for inviting me to participate today. Yes, you're right. So never in your wildest dreams as a MD who has thousands of clients, do you think that all of a sudden overnight that's going to go from many thousands to zero? When one does a strengths and weaknesses analysis, I mean, invariably, your risk is all supply side. So overnight, when all of our salons were shut down, this appeared like Armageddon to us, and we thought that this was the end of the world. Interestingly, 18 months down the line, as we look back over what was, of course, a very turbulent time, we find that business shrunk very little, and that our consumers have continued to use our products, just the route to market has changed. And this, of course, undermines many of those people who try and earn a living on the high street. But what it does tell you is that consumers will continue to consume the products. So across our three brands, we have a nutrition brand that you've already mentioned, the Advanced Nutrition Program. We saw strong growth during the pandemic. Across our skincare brand, we're sort of fairly flatlining. That's the environment. And across our makeup line, there we did see a sharp decline. But I suspect the sharp decline for that was as a result of people probably not going out and not wearing makeup, more so than a move towards, you know, skin minimalist, so to speak. And so I think that, you know, well, not I think, the evidence is that once salons and beauty therapists and skincare professionals opened up again, we saw a big jump in those makeup sales once again, which leads sort of credence to the theory that actually there isn't a lot underpinning the skin minimalist movement, and actually it was more driven by personal requirements, and makeup sales are back up where, you know, where they were before. So that's largely you know, what we're experiencing, but our products are not you know, at the cheap end of the market. We don't have throwaway products or, you know, high fashion. And I suppose the big question is whether there is any movement in the sort of fashion sector of the market where someone might buy a lip color or a nail color to match an outfit and then not use it again. And that really plays very, very largely to the younger generation, where we've developed a culture of throwaway clothes even. And the interesting thing that we're finding, or what we're seeing, is perhaps, you know, many people are relying on the younger generation as the future moving forward, vis-a-vis sustainability, and they'll sort of cure all the ills created by our own generation. And sadly, as time passes, I'm feeling less confident about that, because many of the, if I think back to my own youth, and perhaps you do the same, people in their 20s, you know, when I was at that sort of age, got out onto the street and were very much more active in protesting events and you know, driving change, you know, by getting out there and getting themselves involved. When we look at the young of today, there are those that do that, by no means generalizing right across the board, but far too many people sort of exercise their opinion by clicking likes on Instagram pictures and so on. And I'm afraid, you know, given the enormous task of what we're facing in terms of changing an industry like that we're in, that produces, you know, 120 billion units of plastic packaging a year, is going to need a lot more than just Instagram likes.
Yeah, And I think you touched on something really important there about social media and the fact that it is sort of a key driver of this so-called greenwashing and misinformation, as much as it can be a useful tool. How do you think brands can help to raise awareness and educate in a more engaging way? And then what are you doing personally? Assheton, I wanted to come to you because when we spoke in advance of this, you had a very interesting stance on greenwashing. And I wonder if you could share some of your experience and thinking on that.
Yeah, sure. And I think this came out in your first insight, your first principle that you presented, the narrative underpinned by action. And you know, a brand's core skill, core competence, I think, includes engaging their customers with compelling stories. But there's a risk of telling the story without the substance to back it up. What is the impact of the action that you mentioned? And this can lead to the message sounding inauthentic, or at worst, being found out the facts are being misrepresented. On the other hand, if communications are driven by technical earnestness, sharing data without the story, that can result in the outreach being dry and uninteresting. So in our work with brands, what we try to do is find a balance between getting the facts right and narrating the intriguing story behind the products and the company itself. It's a sustainability journey, as Tiina says. And the science and practice of measuring sustainability is maturing, and brands have been developing much more succinct and substantive reports on effect, on the actual impacts of positive change they're making, not just on management systems and certifications, which quite often don't get absorbed so easily by consumers. So you're measuring their CO2 intensity, measuring the association with deforestation or biodiversity loss, or the reverse, what they've done to actually protect forests. But this can be expensive. So a lot of the innovative work we're doing is figuring out how you can get this credible impact information at a workable level of costs. And then there's a story. And of course, the most exciting thing for us is when we can bring to life what brands are managing to do up their supply chain or with their communities, and how you can use that on the sustainability platform of the brands and really reach out to those consumers. So how do we combat greenwash? Well, I think you've got to combine the substance and the meaning, and that gives choice, that gives confidence, and that gives an air of sophistication that the modern consumer is beginning to demand.
Great. And David, I know that you also feel that actions speak louder than words when it comes to kind of combating greenwashing. And I wondered what you're doing across the sort of IIAA portfolio in order to combat that.
Yeah, well, okay, so very much so. And I'm afraid this is nothing new. I mean, you know, in the old days, we had corporate social responsibility reports, and invariably these sorts of things landed up with the marketing department. And you know, we know where that's led to. We're facing the results of that today. So definitely one needs substantive actions that make a difference. And if we're looking at our own landscape, well, we've got quite an active program going on, but it's a case of putting one's money where one's mouth is. So we're happy to pay end consumers £1 a unit to return our empty products, and then we work with a well-known recycling crowd to break that down, turn that into boards that we can then donate to charities to use in playgrounds and that sort of thing, as you know, as ground cover. So one needs to do things essentially that that can make a substantive difference. And another area is innovation. I mean, we spend enormous amounts of money funding innovation, and particularly on the packaging side, so that we can move away from this concept of non-recyclable packaging in the beauty industry to much more sustainable means. It's about making change that can deliver the sorts of results that we're looking for, rather than simply paying lip service to them.
Yeah. And Tiina, I know you sort of briefly touched on this in your answer to the first question, but I know not just doing, but actually communicating all of the wonderful work that LUMENE is doing to advance sustainability is one of your key areas of focus just now. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, specifically in terms of communication and what resonates with consumers and which channels?
Sure. So I think coming back to Assheton's point earlier, it's really important to have that solid program and actions behind the communication to combat the greenwashing. And I think that it starts with organizational culture too, to talk about these things, and so that all business areas can think, how can I make even small steps towards the better direction? It's really walking the talk. The authenticity and commitments are a must, and I think it comes to the cross-industry collaboration. But like coming back to the 2020, when we started doing the solid framework for our sustainability program, we actually asked our stakeholders. We went out there, we asked, what do they think? How are we performing today? What do they think we should be doing? How just get a little bit of a pulse check on where we are and what the direction, what resonates to them and what do they find important. And there were 4 themes that we identified. And then out of those 4 themes, we came back to the circular beauty. That was our sweet spot. And I think that's where we realized that there's so much we've already done. And then we put together a GRI report to really be transparent on those actions and the relentless action that we've been doing over the years. However, authenticity shouldn't sit in the GRI report. You have to bring that to life and really make that resonate with your audiences in an easily understandable way. And we've started that journey now, but we are not there yet. But what the learnings from the stakeholder analysis was that if you, Sally, and pull up my chart, if you have my circular economy chart, was the fact that we took those stakeholders on the journey. So here is our chart. It has all the parts, and the ultimate goal here is to close the loop and really not have any zero waste at all. But the realization that and the importance of communicating to all stakeholders that nobody can do this alone. We all have a part to play in this circular beauty approach. So we, starting from the products and product development and responsible sourcing, all the way to the committed consumer and how they dispose of the product when they've used it. We started communicating along that, but in particular, the consumer part and the recycling part, which sits down here in this chart in the middle, we've done a lot of work in the recycling part. So for instance, this year, our skincare jar is 100% recyclable. It's we use 45% less material, which when you do the math is 40 tons less plastic a year. And we provide online for the consumers a recycling guide, product-specific recycling guide. How do they dispose of the product? But not just the recycling aspect. We involve them in all the way throughout our NPD process and their consumer voice. So their voice is integrated into this development. So that's been starting from the recycling aspect is the consumer part, but all around here, there's a lot of activities and communications that are key to get through. But we are there. We're not there at the end goal yet, and this is a journey. So look, we produced our second GRI report recently, a couple of months ago, so we continue that. But it's been well received. I have to say that taking people on journey and taking stakeholders on the journey is really well worth it.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed for sharing that insight into your own journey. It's fascinating to hear. I wanted to turn now to the fact that sort of as individual sort of sustainably minded beauty brands, you at LUMENE and you at IIAA and Assheton, you on behalf of your clients are able to embrace sustainability and circularity in your work and your approach. But I wonder what you think the beauty industry as a whole needs to do. David, I know you feel strongly that there's an onus on brands, but actually also a role for governments too. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the big problems that we face is shareholder value. And as a result, it's fantastic to hear from Tiina and of course, Assheton's working with other companies that I'm sure are doing good work too. But by and large, I mean, this morning I was chatting with Mary Portis, and she said you can divide companies into 2 groups. Ones that give her stuff, she used the more exciting word, and ones that don't give her stuff. And she's written a new book about this, and of course written a book about the fact that businesses now need to return value other than to just shareholders. But we live in a capitalist society, for better or for worse, and many businesses, that's just not on the agenda. So there is a very big and very important role for government to play. I'm naturally not a big government person, but this is an example of where government needs to get active. And sadly, we just keep hearing that our own government seems to be failing in that regard, which is disappointing to hear. But there is, I suppose, really the question of whether democracy itself is a problem, and I'm certainly not anti-democratic. But the problem is that to make the real changes that are needed in our world to create sustainable solutions to many of the problems that we're facing are going to require very tough decisions. And the question is whether you have governments in place that are, who need to get voted in 4 years' time again, who are able to make those sorts of decisions. But just coming back to your point about what the industry itself needs to do, and I think a lot of the discussion in and around today's talk, both in your introduction and also by my fellow panelists and myself, frankly, has been around packaging. But of course, you know, the beauty industry doesn't exist purely of packaging, and for a long, long time we've flown way below the radar, whereas, you know, many other industries, the oil and gas industry, the clothing industry, the food industry, have been called out for, you know, their non-sustainable actions. The beauty industry has largely escaped. And at the moment, it's really people, players within the industry that are banging the drum more than anything else. But the bigger area outside of packaging that really needs looking at is ingredients. I mean, you try and produce a beauty skincare product and exclude palm oil from it. I give you that challenge. You know, if it's not an ingredient, double check if it's not an ingredient of an ingredient somewhere on your list. So packaging, ingredients are both important bits. And then as a company, you know, one has to look at one's actions as well. I mean, just looking at ourselves, you know, it wasn't that long ago we had over 80 company cars, either diesel or petrol, in our fleet, and we're down to just 4 now that aren't electric, and those 4 will be changed over pretty soon too. So they're broader things in and around. We've stopped using cow's milk and switched, you know, to oat milk, and I mean, I can give you umpteen examples of, you know, where as a company across the board, we've made changes. But just to go back to the Mary Porter's point, I mean, earlier this year we moved into a new warehouse. I was very, very pleased to see that it had solar panels on the roof. But then, equally as pleased as I was, shocked to see that the previous occupiers of the building hadn't bothered connecting them. There you go. So that was task number 1, but it just shows you really, it's, you know, unfortunately there are not enough people for whom this is important. And so coming back to your earlier point, government, I believe, is a very, very important role to play.
Great. And Tiina, LUMENE, as you've shared, are obviously pioneers in this space, but what do you think would make the biggest change at an industry level?
I do believe that the mindset has to be that it's a joint effort to attain a mutual benefit. Like I think you mentioned about the across industry collaboration, even within the industry collaboration, really advocating for our partners, whether they are within our industry or outside of our industry. This is a task that we need to true teamwork to get to where we need to be. And there's no stakeholder or company that can do this alone. And I think our example goes to show that, for instance, I talked about the Cloudberry. Just to give you an example, with that partner where we started with the Cloudberry, we've patented the innovation with them. So that has provided us with a competitive advantage, and it's really hard to replicate those processes that we've developed and the know-how that has come about during the 20 years we've been working together. So these can provide companies with competitive advantages and really truly setting them apart from the rest. But it needs to think about outside your own sphere of you know, being competitive and really advocating for across the industry. But of course, look, governments are to play. I think EU legislation will push companies more and more to look at these sustainability initiatives in the future, but also certifications are key. because consumers have to navigate this pool of certifications. No wonder they're lost of what is what. So I think a universal certification of some sort would be an aid in that. And at LUMENE, look, we've looked at what would fit our holistic approach the best. We're not there yet. We're still working on that, but I'm sure we'll come to find one. But there's several things that would have to be. I have to say that in our homeland market, Finland is a I think, you know, this sustainability has been is a way of life up here, maybe compared to other nations that I've lived overseas myself as well. So we take this as it's part of the way we operate, if I may generalize that way. And also our trade partners, Finnish trade partners have asked us to be part of their committees and working through the agenda and roadmaps to really do this together. So it is a collaboration across all kinds of things. Same with our packaging side of things, you know, finding packaging that is functional and looking for those solutions. So there is a whole network, it's a joint effort, really.
Yeah. I think, Tiina, that's a really good point. Assheton, I know you talk about actually industry changes predicated on getting to a pre-competitive state, which was a phrase that stayed with me. I wondered if you could potentially elaborate on that and your thinking in that area.
Yeah, and just to reflect on what David said as well, he's absolutely right. Some of these global environmental issues shouldn't be placed at the door of companies alone. The government does have to step up and send a market signal, and I agree that, you know, they can have much larger effect if they want to. You know, we hear a lot of criticisms about China, but they're probably the only country could have a billion tree project in the Gobi Desert. If they want to do it, they can do it, and they need to lead as well and stop shifting the responsibility where it shouldn't really be placed. But yes, I absolutely agree with Tiina's points, and this is really the theme I was going to bring up, and I touched on it earlier, that one of the encouraging things coming out of the last rather dismal 18 months is the willingness of peers and competitors to collaborate to solve these common problems, and it's exactly as Tiina says, we have a larger brand, these environmental and social issues that reside in supply chains. And to David's point, we do most of our work actually is now on ingredients, is on those supply chains, is larger than any one company can tackle. And the rights groups, the NGOs, the environmental NGOs, are not saying to companies, do your best to do no harm. They're saying take action to make a positive difference. And that can't be done alone, however big you are. And so really the goal has to be to raise all boats. If not, all will sink, because we see this very starkly when international rights groups pick on a health and safety issue or a labor issue or environmental issue. The shock wave covers the whole industry, not just a few companies. So there's a move to kind of join hands and approach these things. How? Well, there's several kind of action platforms, industry action platforms is a name that there's given to them to allow encouraging good practices. So in another part of the luxury industry, we've recently launched something called the Gemstone and Jewelry Community Platform. And this is a group of 12 different brands, including LVMH, Kering, Tiffany, and others as well. And this is provided completely free, and it allows everybody in the supply chain to come on, learn about sustainability in a very structured way, but also gives them the tools to do it. So the actual implementable tools to do it, and a way to test and verify and meet a standard. And so Tiina's point, yes, people want recognition, but they don't want to be excluded. And the dark side of certification is that it can exclude some suppliers of ingredients who might not have the capacity or who are earlier on in their journey. That shouldn't be our ambition. Our ambition should be inclusive. So what this platform does is provide the enabling environment, those tools, those mechanisms, those resources, so they can lift all up. And I think that really is the only way forward. It can be very difficult because it's not a natural instinct of competitors to get into the same room and talk about how they can improve the industry when they want their slice of the cake. But when people realize that their future depends on it, the reputation of the industry depends on it, and their future depends on it, then we are finding that these collaborative spaces are emerging in several different parts of our work.
Great. And my next question is a little bit more of a tricky one that we've scattered around a couple of the things, but just really want to dive into it. So it's fair to say that several beauty industry conventions are inherently and necessarily unsustainable. So things like sampling, packaging, which we touched on, but they're also essential due to hygiene standards and product safety. So how are you working to reconcile this tension? And Tiina, perhaps you can tell us what you're doing at LUMENE on this point.
Sure. So look, it is a journey. I'd say the sustainability, it is a journey, and we have, since the pandemic, reduced the number of sampling, although we recognize that during the pandemic, consumers want to try, and we've removed almost all of our testers from stores. So sampling is important. It's important for makeup, but it's important for skincare as well. So we reduced the sampling, but again, we've been consciously looking, actively looking for more sustainable solutions. And I think this is a shout out to partners out there that I'm sure we're not alone in this, finding more sustainable ways of sampling for at-home consumers. The other thing where we looked at reducing our portfolio is a single product or single-use product. So it is an area where we've consciously taking steps. So it is a journey, and like I said, the packaging is the biggest one because it's easy for consumers to understand. But we've had again local partners here in Finland for recycling, for instance, that we partner with. We've now started to use FSC cardboard for our outer cardboards and shippers. So there's a lot of initiatives that we've done in this regard to reduce the impact on the environment. So it's a journey, but look, it's like I said, again, it's a cross-border holistic approach and cross-industry effort that is taken to solve the issue or solve the problem.
Absolutely. And David, I know that you're very much not afraid to acknowledge this tension, and that you're, very much focused on the bigger picture. And as you mentioned previously, pioneering new packaging innovation. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing to kind of confront this tension head on and work to reconcile it?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we prepare to buy back our empties for not insubstantial sums. I mean, it comes to tens and tens of thousands of pounds. We've got patent pending new packaging solutions, which we're going to be very happy to share with the industry soon. That will hopefully drive some change. But I want to pick up on the sampling issue because that's quite an interesting one. When last did you go to the doctor and he said, try a sample of this and see if it works for you, and then if you come back, then I'll give you the full antibiotic or whatever it is. We work through education to try and empower skincare professionals. So even if they're on the department store floor, or if they're in a salon or a clinic or Medispa or whatever the case is, to instead of trying to sell to their clients, to educate their clients why it is that they need their product. And if you do that, you can dispense the sampling entirely. And I'm quite sure that Assheton will be advising many of his clients that, it's time to make substantive changes, actual real changes to the way we do business, because just doing the same thing we've always done, it's not going to get us to the place we want to be.
Yeah. Assheton, David teed me up perfectly. We'd love to hear from you and your perspective on this.
Well, look, and you've heard from two brands who are doing amazing things. So really all I can do is summarize what they said, I think. But the first point is that there are trade-offs. So when people ask, is this sustainable or not? You go, I don't think I know anything which is sustainable. There's always a trade-off. You just got to look hard enough to find it. So our job is to reduce that trade-off. And I think that's of the three things we look at when we're asked this question, that's what we look at. How can you reduce the trade-off through innovation like David's company is doing, reduce the amount of packaging used, recycled, and so on. But then absolutely, it's about the business model. You can only tweak and finesse so much when it comes to the business model. So can you actually look at a new business model, whether it's buying back the packaging or eliminating the need for packaging altogether? And then the third thing I think, which is sometimes overlooked, is when there are trade-offs which cannot be eliminated, because at the end of the day, we've got to sell products that people will buy, and if the consumers want them, they want them. The purpose of the company is to provide them. But many brands are aspirational. People come to brands because they have meaning. And so I kind of feel that brands have a platform where they can actually educate. And I think David was just mentioning that. And that's kind of what we talked about. Is 5 years ago, brands reluctant to say our job isn't to educate the consumer, our job is to meet their needs. But I think that's switched now, because the consumer, with raised awareness just in the last 18 months, the Biden administration, what's happening in the EU, COP coming up, are wanting to have those answers. And if the brands that they are loyal to can provide them with some of those answers, I think that'll breed customer loyalty and not be seen as arrogant or grandstanding.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So I have a final area of questioning, which I'm conscious we have kind of touched upon in some of the other answers inevitably, and it's really looking into the role of partnerships and collaborations. David, I know you feel that partnerships are interesting and valuable, but actually shouldn't prove a distraction from getting your own brand in order. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that I think you've pretty much summed up my feelings on the sort of thing. And I think maybe I come from a slightly different perspective. I mean, you did mention in the introduction that I have a passion for underwater photography. I'm an environmental campaigner, and that's because I do have I am lucky enough, I should say, to be able to travel with my hobby, certainly historically more than that currently, and it's taken me out into the wilds of the world. And it's only when one goes out into the wilds that you actually start to see what the face of climate change looks like. I think you've got a picture of mine that you were using to advertise the event. It wasn't me underwater, by the way. That's a picture of my son. And I don't know, Sally, if you've got the picture handy. This photograph, that if Sally can find it, otherwise it's on the there we go. I took a couple of weeks ago, and it's a very, very distressing and very sad photograph. What it is, it's taken in Greece, and it's taken in an area where I've dived for the last 16 years. And what you should have in this area is visibility that's spanning about 40 to 50 meters, but in reality, it's only about 4 or 5 meters there. And actually, that was quite a good day. There was times when it was lower than that. And the visibility has been reduced by a massive algal bloom. And the algal blooms tend to suck up the oxygen. So when you dive deeper than that, obviously it creates a great environment for jellyfish, or a very bad environment for things that feed on jellyfish. But basically there's a jellyfish proliferation, as you can see. But when one dives deeper down to the reef below this was dying. I mean, it's very difficult to describe what that's like, but imagine just going out into your garden and everything in front of you is dying or dead. The little hydroids on which the little colorful nudibranchs feed were all dead, so there were no nudibranchs. Nudibranchs are these little colorful sea slugs, but the moray eels were like gasping for air because they couldn't breathe, so they'd come out of their holes, and then they'd been attacked by other animals, so they had big bite marks in them, and they were dying and going blind. I have to say, it was a very, very, very distressing place to dive. And when you lifted your head above the water, you could hardly breathe because of all the smoke that was coming from the fires in and around the area, and the great big sort of flames leaping into the air. And it actually felt largely like you'd reached the end of the world. And sadly, this is my only experience of seeing climate change firsthand on the front line. I mean, I photographed up in the Arctic the most beautiful polar bear mother with her 2 baby cubs, that when I showed it to a polar bear expert, said that they weren't in a strong enough condition to make it to the next ice season. They'll be dead by the time I showed him the photograph. And it's these sorts of things when you travel around and you actually understand that it's time to make real proper change. You know, we can tinker around the edges, but unless we start to do substantive things in our businesses, in our personal lives, in the people that we vote for in government, and so on and so forth, unless we bring about real change, we're heading very, very close and very, very quickly towards a cliff edge. Where you will see total collapses of ecosystems, as was happening there in Greece in that particular case. And you know, it doesn't take multiple ecosystems to start collapsing before you start finding life on Earth. For us as humans, it becomes very difficult. So sorry to paint what's quite a negative picture on a day like today, when you when you logged on to hear about the beauty industry, but that's the reality. So, you know, we can collaborate and we can meet as many of our colleagues and talk about stuff. I was on a panel not that long ago where the consensus was that the big thing for end consumers to do was, instead of washing their hair twice, they only needed to wash it once. And this was the advice from companies that were doing billion-euro turnovers to all the listeners in on the day. And, you know, that's not going to hack it. That's not going to hack it. We're facing the need for real change. So don't be distracted by what other people are doing. See what it is that you can do. And make the changes that you as a company can afford to make. Ultimately, actually, interestingly enough, you know, we've only gone from strength to strength as a company making those changes. Maybe it's because the staff believe in what it is that we're doing. Maybe it's because the clients believe in what it is that we're doing. But although we're spending more and more money in this space, we're not seeing it impact the bottom line ultimately. So maybe sustainability and the bottom line can go hand in hand, but ultimately, as Assheton says, you know, something's got to give, and we got tough choices to make.
Yeah, and on that note, I'm very conscious that we're rapidly running out of time. So thank you actually for bringing us to a sort of very macro level perspective on the industry and what needs to happen. And I think we'll all go away and reflect and take action. Thank you so much for our fantastic panelists today, Tiina, David and Assheton. Your insights have been totally invaluable. I think we could go on for another hour very easily, but thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your experience and your wisdom and your expertise. Thank you very much indeed to everybody who has tuned in. Be sure to follow Spring for details of our future webinars, and all that remains is for me to say to you, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks.